Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another TeleTown Hall. I'm Congressman Scott Perry, and I'm looking forward to talking with you, answering your questions about issues facing our communities and the nation, and generally just, seeing what's on your mind this evening. Before we get started, and while we let some questions build up in the queue, let's go over the basics of how this whole thing's going to work so as many people get a chance to ask the question as possible. Now, to get in the queue, and I'll say this multiple times during the call, but to get in the queue to ask a question, please just press *3. That's *3 to ask a question. At the end of this TeleTown Hall, if you want to get on our email list, you can press *6. That's at the end. Again, if you want to get in the queue, press *3 and *6 at the end of TeleTown Hall to get on our email distribution list so you can receive updates, press releases, newsletters, notifications for events like this one, etc., directly to your inbox. As you can imagine, this is a great way to stay in touch without having to check social media all the time because it just comes to you. Speaking of social media, if you're not already following me on X, Facebook, or Instagram, I am at Rep Scott Perry on all the platforms. That's at Rep Scott Perry. One last note, since this is an official legislative event, please keep in mind that I can't take or answer any campaign-related questions on this call. This is all official business. Okay, so with that, let's get started. We got staff members that are on the line ready to take your questions and get you in the queue. I'm looking forward to hearing what's on your mind. So press *3 to ask a question. While we continue to let the questions build in the queue, let me give you a general kind of legislative update or just talk about some topics that are currently happening in Washington and around the world right now. I get the feeling that some of these are going to come up tonight anyhow, so let's just start with some of this stuff. I'm going to start with energy prices. We hear a lot about energy prices, especially associated with impending data centers, and that the data centers are going to drive up energy prices. And what I want to let you know is, regardless of the data centers, your prices have been going up for electricity for about 10 years or better. And that is because of policy choices that our governors and our legislature in the state has made. Over the last 11 years, Pennsylvania has shut off about 5 gigawatts of base load power. What's base load power? That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The power's on, and it generally is generated by your traditional sources. So that's coal, that's nuclear, that's natural gas, and we've shut that off. And of course, as you shut off supply, at the same time, our government keeps encouraging people to use more electricity. That increases demand. So less supply, more demand, the price for everybody goes up. What I want to let you know is that these are policy choices made by policy makers. This is not, the market saying, oh, well, we have too much electricity, so we're going to shut off this plant. That hasn't happened. This is due to regulatory requirements, and generally speaking, people don't like those traditional sources of energy, and they're trying to, by policy, impose on us the least affordable and most unreliable sources of energy on the planet, namely wind and solar. That's why your bills keep going up, and that's why they have gone up. In Washington, D.C., just as a note, as long as we're talking about energy prices, in the Working Families Tax Cut bill, we fought hard to make sure that you're no longer subsidizing the renewable energy industry, which you were forced to do at an alarming rate, which was causing all the investment in energy to go to those sources, which again are the most expensive, least reliable, and it cuts out investment in the traditional sources. So over time now, as more traditional sources come back online, your affordability is going to improve. It won't happen overnight. It took about 10, 15 years to get to where we are, but we're going to try and at least turn the corner from the federal level on energy prices. So I wanted to talk about that. Healthcare prices is another thing I hear about pretty regularly, and it's not surprising. Healthcare prices are outrageous, and they have been for a very long time. What's interesting to me is the blame game, among other things. We're being told, we're not, as Republicans who are in charge of the House, not fixing the health care prices. Well, just to be clear, and not to get too partisan about all this, we didn't create this problem. This problem was created under a thing called the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, and a bunch of folks like me, I wasn't elected at the time, but said, this is going to destroy your affordability in health care. And remember that, generally speaking, the insurance companies wrote that bill, and of course, they're doing quite well. If you look at the profits of insurance companies since then, oftentimes over 1,000% increase in profit. So now, what have we done about it? We have tried, and we have passed a few things in the House, not as much as I'd like to, but I've talked to my Senate colleagues because, as you know, we have to, once you pass something in the House, that's not enough. You got to pass it in the Senate, too, to get a presidential signature before it becomes enacted. And my Senate colleagues say that we can pass nothing in the Senate on health care because we will get no help from the other side of the aisle. What they want us to do, and I know that I've been criticized for this, is subsidize the insurance companies with these increased payments. Ladies and gentlemen, subsidizing the insurance companies isn't going to lower your price. It's just going to give the insurance companies more money. So I did vote against that. And, first of all, we're $40 trillion in debt. And again, I want to see your prices lowered, not just give money to the insurance companies. So we can talk more about health care. If you want to, again, press *3 to get in the queue for a question. And just moving on while we're letting the queue build, let's talk about the Iran war a little bit. Look, none of us want to be in a war with anybody, least of which Iran. Unfortunately, Iran declared war on the United States about 47 years ago in the 70s, and they've been at war with us ever since. And, while they have killed or maimed thousands and potentially tens of thousands of Americans, no one's been really willing to do anything about it. And, of course, as time has gone on, they have sought and become closer and closer to being able to produce a nuclear weapon and deliver it around the globe, which is really scary because, of course, they shout death to America, and they mean it, as evidenced not only by what they say, but what they do whenever they have a chance to kill an American. And so the president, seeing that this is an imminent threat, took action. And we are where we are right now because war is imperfect. And of course, the enemy gets a vote in this whole thing. And, they're fighting back, as you can imagine. So that's one of the things that are causing the price of gasoline to be high, because even though the United States is energy independent and energy dominant again, we buy our oil and fuel on a global market price. So whatever happens to the global market affects the United States market as well. I would hope that this will be resolved pretty quickly, but I would just say this. If Iran can extort the whole world without nuclear weapons like they're doing right now by threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz and attacking ships in the strait as they try and traverse it, just imagine what Iran would do if they could extort the world under the threat of a nuclear holocaust. So that's kind of the update on the Iran war. I don't love it. I know you don't either. Unfortunately, we can't always control when our enemies want to either attack us or continue to kill us. And at some point, you've had enough of it. So again, press *3. I got a couple more things I want to talk about, and then I think we'll be able to go to question and answer. So we're just trying to build up the queue right now. The next thing I want to talk about is birthright citizenship and surrogacy. As you might be aware, the president just signed an executive order denying or outlawing the concept of birthright citizenship for people that do birth tourism. That's people that come to the United States of America solely and simply and for the express purpose of having a baby in America, not only for the financial incentives, because oftentimes the baby delivery is paid for not by the person that's delivering the baby or that family, but also automatically that little baby is a United States citizen. And what's really reprehensible is that there are particular nations that do it as an industry, and they do it for the express purpose of having an American citizen who doesn't grow up in America. Now, I'm talking particularly about China, where this is an industry. It's why I introduced a surrogacy bill in the halls of Congress, because believe it or not, there is a whole industry where the Chinese Communist Party surrogates children in the United States. The baby is born in the United States and immediately taken to China. This is an American citizen who will grow up in China, have allegiance to China, but yet be able to vote in our elections. So I've got a bill to deal with that. And just as an aside, I don't know whether you knew this or not, but there was a case in Pennsylvania where a convicted child predator and his partner surrogated a child. Now, it's illegal for a child predator to adopt a child, but so far it is not illegal for a child predator to surrogate a child. And so in the interest of the child and putting the child's welfare as the primary goal and what the focus should be, I introduced legislation to also make sure that surrogating a child for those who are convicted of child sex crimes is illegal. All right, last topic before we get to the questions. And again, press *3 if you want to get in the queue. A lot of people have asked me what's the status of the Save America Act. I'm sure you're probably familiar at this point. That is the law that we passed in the House 4 or 5 times now, which requires proof of citizenship to vote in United States federal elections and proof of identification to vote in United States federal elections. We have passed that in the House now 4 or maybe 5 times, can't remember, but a bunch of times at this point. It remains stalled in the Senate. We were hoping that they were going to include it in what's called the reconciliation package that we also sent to the Senate at the end of last month, but apparently the Senate has left town without considering that at this point. So hopefully when they come back in, we'll see some consideration of that. The reason it's being put on reconciliation is because, as you know, even though the Republicans are in the majority, it's a numerical majority of 53, but in the Senate you need 60 votes to pass anything, and they can't get 7 Democrats to agree with moving that bill and passing it, so it's stalled. The only real way to get it through is through the process of reconciliation or using the standing filibuster, which I have also advocated for. I think it's important, as the most important deliberative body on the planet, that they actually have the debate. Even if the vote fails, they should at least have the debate and have the vote, and let's see where members stand. Okay, I think, and I hope we're ready for questions. One last note before we get to the questions, and you're pressing *3 to get in the queue. We're going to ask a couple brief poll questions throughout our call tonight, and I'll let you know when we get to each one of them so you can express your opinion on that. Okay, let's go to the first question.
Sir, you have Joseph from Camp Hill with a question on Iran.
Hey, Joseph, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Hey, Congressman. I just wanted to ask, I think we're seeing that, the president's getting closer to a golden age of America, and the economy is just really taking off. But at the same time, we got to make sure Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. And so I just want to know what you're doing in Washington to make sure we can implement the president's economic agenda and make sure we get the golden age and make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon and we don't give up too early on this quest that the president's on to make sure they don't get a nuclear weapon.
Well, and thanks so much for the question, Joseph. What I've done is, of course, I've been many trips to the Pentagon, spoken to the secretary about the needs that he has, that we have to try and make sure that, we have the munitions, the capability, the armament, et cetera, to make sure that Iran does not ever get a nuclear weapon. And again, unfortunately, Iran gets a vote in this whole thing, and they are working very diligently to reconstitute their program. And let me just say this too, Joseph. Maybe people don't understand this because they might say, well, I thought, we dealt with this last spring when we bombed these sites. These sites are very deep underground, and they are able to a certain extent to thwart complete destruction by even the best weapons that we have. We might hit the entrances, but these things are very deep underground by design. And what's different about Iran now than it used to be in the old days was where Iran would procure equipment, centrifuges, et cetera, from other nations, maybe it'd be Pakistan, North Korea, China, Russia, whatever, to reconstitute their program. But over the course of decades now, Iran has become very proficient in just reconstructing these components themselves. And so while we have hit them, they go right back to reconstructing their program. It's not like they have to go out and try and purchase it and smuggle it in. And so they quickly reconstitute underground. And when I say underground, I don't think some of this is classified, obviously, but it's hard to imagine how deep in some of these places that they are. If you've heard of Pickaxe Mountain, that's one of the places that is very, very deep underground and is hard to reach. That having been said, so supportive of the making sure that we have what we need to do to service that target. We want to get the Straits of Hormuz open. On the other side of the equation, on the economic side, listen, every time I get an opportunity to make sure that you keep more of the money that you earn, I take it. So that's why I voted in favor of keeping your tax rates low. They were scheduled to go up at an astounding rate. Unfortunately, that was a partisan vote. Republicans voted to keep your taxes low. The other side voted to increase all those taxes. And we also reduced some long-held taxes that should be reduced, namely the no tax on tips, the reduction in tax on overtime, and the reduction in tax on Social Security earnings. At the same time, on the other side of that equation is government spending, which has always been the Achilles heel, I think, of both parties. And I have fought with the other party and my own party for overspending, and that continues to this day. And, just to let you know, the president feels the same way. I talked to him about the amount of spending because it's still too much. And he said to me, Scott, I agree with you, but I can't get them, meaning usually the United States Senate and some of my colleagues in the House, I can't get them to vote to spend less money. We got, in the one bill, we saved $2 trillion, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's the most money that has ever been saved over 10 years. But at the same time, there were still the same amount of votes to keep on spending at the same general rate on things that, we just simply can't afford. And every time the government does that, they make every dollar that you earn worth a little bit less. And that's the inflationary pressures. And both parties are responsible for that failure there. But at least where I stand. It has been one of the perennial things that I went to Washington, D.C. to fight on, which is our out of control debt and deficit. So two things on the economy, you keeping more of your money and the government spending less of your money. All right. So remember this too, Joseph, one last comment. Every time I vote on spending, all that spending is borrowed money. Every single penny of it is borrowed money. So I'm very careful about what I say yes to. It better be worth it because we're borrowing every bit of it and mortgaging our future, and nobody wants to raise taxes, and I certainly don't want to do that either. The choice is either raise taxes or cut spending. Those are our options. All right, so thanks so much for the question. I'm going to go to the first poll question at this time. And so this is the question. Are you concerned that the United States may be headed down the path to communism? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. So the question, are you concerned that the U.S. may be headed down the path to communism? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. And press *3 to get in the queue. All right. Let's see who else is on the line here.
Sir, we have Matt from Carlisle with a question on data centers.
Yes, sir. Matt, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So what are you doing to help our townships protect themselves against data centers? They're coming in and buying up farmland, getting close to more populated areas. and, raising ground temperatures by up to 16 degrees, destroying local populations of animals, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Matt, thanks. It's a great question. The federal government, this is generally the data center, just like, a movie theater or a housing development are generally local zoning and local township, borough, et cetera, your local political subdivision. That's their business, what they allow in their ordinances and so on and so forth. What I am doing is making sure that we ask the questions and we consider either legislation or regulation that protects not only the groundwater, but quite honestly, data centers can be and have been associated with high noise levels, electromagnetic frequencies, and of course, a massive amount of electricity use. And so as we consider these things, and look, most of your townships and boroughs, they probably can't, they can't compete with the legal team that many of the companies that represent data centers have, and so they're outnumbered in that regard. But I would say this: the last thing that we need to be doing is subsidizing them. And for some time here in Pennsylvania, we had the governor had called to subsidize data centers, and while maybe the location is correct or the application is correct, assuming that all the the concerns that Matt already enumerated are addressed appropriately, these are some of the wealthiest companies on the planet, and they certainly don't need tax incentives. They come in with a boatload of cash to begin with. We don't need to be incentivizing them. Yes, we have to be competitive with other states and so on and so forth, but I think, Matt, you would agree there seems to be no lack of interest across the whole countryside to put these things in different size and so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of federal nexus. The federal government usually doesn't determine these kind of things, except, like I said, an overall broad approach to certain industries that might have a particular impact on communities and so on and so forth, just by virtue of what they do. But we generally speaking don't regulate steel mills any differently than we would regulate some other kind of heavy manufacturing operation. And data centers as an industry, whether it's shopping malls or what have you, fall under some of those very similar constraints. But we do know that there are particular concerns about them, and we are considering them right now, especially in the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, because there's a lot riding on artificial intelligence and getting this right as well. So I appreciate the question, Matt. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Corinne from Hummelstown with a question on the SAVE Act.
Hey, Corinne, how are you?
Oh, I'm great, but I'm very frustrated because I'm working on a campaign for the governor, Stacey Garrity, and I spend a lot of time on the phone calling. And
are you there, Corinne? I hope that's. Maybe, Corinne, I feel like we lost you. Hopefully you can call back. I didn't get to hear your question. Do we have another question, please?
Sir, we have Deborah from Boiling Springs with a question on the SAVE Act.
Hey, Deborah, how are you? Are you there?
I am doing well, considering I got to meet you in your office one day, and I think you're my superhero. I want to see you be superhero and get this SAVE Act passed.
Well, Deborah, look, I couldn't agree with you more. Like I said, I worked with the prime author on the bill itself, and now it came out of the Judiciary Committee, which I do not sit on, but helped craft that bill with very specific intentions of just making sure that we could trust in our elections. And then, what I have done is be instrumental in making sure that got to the House floor for a vote and was put on what we call must-pass legislation on numerous occasions. So like I said, we have passed it, I think, 4, maybe 5 times in the House of Representatives, and I voted for it each time. We're very clear, even in a small majority in the House of Representatives, where we stand on this particular piece of legislation regarding citizenship for voting and verification, identification for voting. We're very clear on that. Unfortunately, what I can't do is force senators to vote yes or no or do anything. I have obviously talked to many of the senators, including our own, and urged them to do whatever they could, but they have their own process over there. And I've also supported what's called using the standing filibuster, because what happens right now, what seems to me is happening, it's frustrating all of us, Deborah, is that the Senate leader comes out and says, we don't have the votes for it. Well, it's one thing to hear somebody say that, but it's another to see it with your own eyes. So the standing filibuster would mean that they would bring the bill up, they would debate it for however long it took, Deborah. It might take 2 hours, it might take 2 weeks continuously, but whatever it takes, have the debate. If you're not for it, that's fine. Make your points. If you're for it, that's great. Make your points. But at the end of the standing filibuster, there would be a vote, and we would know where everyone stands, if you're for it or against it. And, of course, now I hope it passes. I voted for it numerous times. But we at least ought to know where our representatives in the Senate stand on this thing and many other issues. But so don't just tell us we don't have the votes. Show us by putting it on the floor, and that's what I would like to see. So I'm very frustrated as well, Deborah, but I'm one of 435 in the House, and I'm not in the Senate at all. So at that point, I'm a constituent like everybody else, and, I make my feelings known and my wishes known to members of the Senate, including the Pennsylvania delegation. So you're not alone in your frustration. I know that's a little solace, but that's just kind of where it stands right now. We were hoping they were gonna keep it in the reconciliation package that we sent over there. They left town without taking it up. So hopefully, look, I would encourage everybody that wants it to call your United States Senator, in the next week or so, and let them know that you want them to bring that bill on the floor, have a debate, and have a vote on it. That would be great. Thanks for the question, Deborah. All right, next question, please.
Sir, we have Dana from Camp Hill with a question on the Act for ALS.
Okay. Dana, are you there?
I am. Hi, Congressman. I'm from Camp Hill, and I actually was just calling to thank you because you did support.
Where did you go, Dana? All right. I don't know if this is on our end or what, but that's the second call we've lost here. And see if maybe Dana can call back. I think she was talking about the Act for ALS bill that we just ran through the House of Representatives. I don't know what its fate is in the Senate, but ALS is a horrific situation and circumstance for family members and individuals to find themselves in, and it's one of the things that modern medicine, I would hope, would be able to cure. And so we want to help out with, we want to make sure that we are victorious over ALS, just in case Dana doesn't get the call back in. All right, next call, please.
Sir, we have Sean from York with a question on gun rights.
Okay, Sean, go ahead.
Yes, Senator, thanks for taking the call. I was wondering if we could reintroduce, I know the bill was introduced a long time ago, and it fell flat, but I don't think it was introduced this time under President Trump, and where we all sit currently. But to get national reciprocity or constitutional carry and get it passed where it's something that we don't have to spend, thousands of dollars to be able to, exercise our God-given rights. I don't need to get a different driver's license when I go to New York. I don't need to get a different driver's license when I go to any state in the continental U.S. So I don't think we should have to to get different permits to carry our firearms if we choose to do so?
Okay, Sean, it's a great question. And just to bring everybody up to speed, oftentimes constitutional carry, that legislation is handled by individual states. I don't know that there's the political will in Pennsylvania right now as far as reciprocity. So that would mean, what that means is that if you have a permit to carry in your state, we're in Pennsylvania, so if you have a permit to carry in Pennsylvania, that permit would then be valid in the other states. That's what's called reciprocity. We did have that bill available to us a few sessions ago, and we were really pushing to see if we could get a vote on that. Finally, it came up on the floor for a vote, and they put another policy on it called NICS Fix. Believe it or not, the federal government requires each state to feed information on felons and people that shouldn't have guns. So you might have, if you're a felon or you're violent or you're not, you've been adjudicated as not of sound mental capacity. They're supposed to put that in the National Insta-Check system, the NICS system. The states are supposed to do that. The states get delinquent in doing that. They just don't do it. They don't bother doing it. And so when there's a background check conducted on somebody to buy a gun, their name does not come up as someone who's restricted. And so then the retailer sells them the firearm, and now you have somebody that's a felon or shouldn't have a gun that now has a gun. And so what the NICS fix was that they attached to the reciprocity bill was a bribe to the states, where we were going to give the money states to comply with the things they're supposed to be doing in the first place. I mean, only in federal government do you bribe people to obey the law or bribe the states to obey the law. Now, we rejected that because we said, first of all, you're not supposed to bribe the states, and second of all, we want reciprocity. And what's going to happen is if you tie those two bills together, we will vote for it. It will go to the Senate. The Senate will strip out reciprocity and send back the NICS fix, which is exactly what happened. So we voted for reciprocity. The Senate didn't want to do it, so they just sent back NICS fix, and we never got reciprocity. So I would agree with you. Look, now I will make this distinction. People don't like to hear it, but I got to call the balls and strikes. Driving in every state is a privilege, where owning and possessing and carrying a firearm is a right. It's a constitutional right. So having your driver's license isn't really the same as availing yourself to your Second Amendment rights. That having been said, though, even though that is true, I still agree with you, Sean. We should have, look, if you pass a background check and get your license to carry a weapon in your state, as long as you comply with the provisions of another state, you should be allowed to protect yourself. Oftentimes people are traveling, and they're traveling to dangerous places. It's the place where they do need to protect themselves, and it's out of state. So they either make a choice, either go unprotected or potentially run afoul of the law and deal with that. And that is not, that is to me, a abrogation of the government for you to have, your constitutional right to defend yourself. So I would agree with you. And Sean, since you brought it up, I will check to see what the status of reciprocity or constitutional carry is. I thought they were both reintroduced, but I don't know where they stand. Thanks for the question. All right, next question, please.
Sir, we have Grant from Boiling Springs with a question on the IRS.
Okay, Grant, go ahead.
Hi, Scott. How are you? Yeah, I was just calling, because, as you mentioned many times, that you are no fan of our wild spending nature. But on the other hand, you've also voted on several occasions to strip the IRS of its core duties of basically trying to take in as much revenue as possible. And there's been many reports of how efficient the IRS is when it comes to auditing, and especially taking care of folks that are underreporting their taxes or otherwise not paying their fair share. So if you're serious about taking down the deficit, why aren't we funding the IRS to take down or to actively pursue financial crimes and actual theft from the American people?
Well, I appreciate the question, Grant, but I just have to fundamentally disagree with you. There's nothing that says that the IRS their so-called or alleged inability to collect money is the problem. We bring in more revenue, and understand the government doesn't earn one dime. It takes the money it gets from its citizens, and we are bringing in record amounts of revenue. But even while we bring in record amounts of revenue, we still exceeded in spending. And my point to you, Grant, is this: no matter how much we bring in, it is apparent to me, and it should be apparent to everybody listening, that the government has an insatiable appetite to always want more. And I don't think that the answer is to hire a whole bunch of more people with the authority to come into your home and go through your records and prey upon you for missing some. Most people want to pay their fair share and do pay their fair share. And if they don't, it's due to a mistake. There are people that do want to flout the law and do that proactively. They are criminals, and they should be investigated, charged, and prosecuted if they are conducting the crimes. But there is no empirical evidence that I've seen anywhere. And if you have it, Grant, and want to provide it for me, I'll be happy to consider it. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to admit it. But I have seen no empirical evidence that the IRS is the problem and that collections or the lack of collections is the reason that the government doesn't have more money. Again, we are taking in record amounts of revenue. Okay, next question, please.
Sir, we have Heidi from Carlisle with a question on water.
Okay, Heidi, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Perry. This is the first time I've actually got to listen to you. I'm kind of impressed. So I see that you are worried about our spending and what comes out of our pockets, but I'm confused on that only because I live in a farm area and I have well water, and my well water is contaminated by all the pesticides from the farms around me. So now I have to put in a filtering system so that we can drink the water coming out of our faucets. And then a mile up the road is going to be an AI data center is what they're trying to put in. And we're all well water here. And so if that AI comes in, there's already been reports of bees disappearing, so our farmers are going to have issues. And then there's also about sterile calves not being born or being stillborn because of AI centers. And then health issues, and then the lack of water. So one of these AI centers come in and they have loads of money apparently, and they're allowed to do whatever they want, and they dry up our wells. And then we are supposed to do what? Who is protecting our water? Who is protecting our citizens? Who are protecting us to stay healthy so we don't have medical issues? I'd like to know why this isn't an issue for everybody and why they aren't more concerned, because if you don't have water, you're done.
Heidi, I do think that people are concerned. I hear about this issue front and center, not only for data centers, but certainly you make a great case regarding the contaminated water, and it's not all due to pesticides. I've heard from other folks in your area about, different things on the field other than pesticides that have contaminated wells and by over application and so on and so forth. We do have regulations for that. Unfortunately, some people run afoul of that, and that's why we have the Department of Environmental Protection to make sure that those who conduct that are then cited, and they should be compensating you if they indeed have done that against the law. Now, I would agree with you that some things aren't against the law, and we're behind on getting to deal with things like over application of pesticides or certain pesticides and knowing what's in them. And unfortunately, the forces in Washington, D.C. and at the state are large, and the constituencies for those forces are large too. And we haven't done a great job in a timely fashion at dealing with some of those issues. But I would tell you this Make America Healthy Again movement is really taking a very critical eye, as they should, to all these different things and how they affect us. And I'm a little bit older than probably a lot of people on this call. I can tell you that growing up, I didn't know one person with a peanut allergy or a wheat allergy or a lot of the other things that affect our longevity. And unfortunately, instead of increasing our lifespan in America right now, we're declining, which is headed in the wrong direction. And I do wonder how much some of these things that allegedly make our lives better are actually contributing to the health problems that we have. And so for me, I have in particular, and this is not necessarily dealing exactly with this issue, but for instance, the vaccine companies are immune to generally because of in the 1980s a law that made them immune to any consequence for the vaccines that they produce. And look, I know that we want to have vaccines. I've been vaccinated, especially as a military person, a whole bunch of times on different kinds of things for deployments, et cetera. But it's a whole lot more than it used to be, and we seem to have these problems. So there is a very concerted effort to look at all this stuff from a health standpoint, from the Center for Disease Control, and from the federal government health care, CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, from folks like them, Pennsylvania's Dr. Oz and RFK are both looking at that, and we've had regular conversations about it. Regarding the water usage, look, I'm as well familiar as anybody. I served on the Source Water Protection Committee in my town on several occasions, and even chaired it. And so you're absolutely right. Water is critical, and it is clean and fresh water is a finite. It's a finite property. It's not never ending, and so we do have to safeguard it. But I'd be interested to know, look, these data centers, they do require a massive amount of cooling, generally speaking, because of the heat that they produce from the functions that they provide. That having been said, a lot of times they have what's called a closed loop system, and I don't know the one that you're talking about, Heidi, if it does or it doesn't. I don't know exactly where you live. I'm probably not really familiar with it at all. But once the loop is filled, the only thing that they do then is make up what evaporates, which is usually a pretty small fraction. As a matter of fact, if you live near, and we don't do this a whole lot in South Central Pennsylvania, we do some, but if you live near one of those irrigation posts that has a big irrigation, a tower with an arm attached to it that runs in a circle, you see them a lot, like in the northwestern states. They pull out much, much more water, fresh water, than these closed loop systems. Now, it does obviously go back into the ground and recharges the ground eventually, but look, there's a lot of reasons that people are opposed to data centers, and I get it. I understand completely, and there's a lot of concern, and the concern is righteous. There's a way to do things, and there's a way not to do things. We are, as I discussed before, we are looking at federal regulation, but it would have to be industry-wide. It can't just be for one thing. That's not fair to anybody, so it would have to be a sweeping regulation for water use in general by industry, and we currently have that kind of we have those federal regulations, and we have state regulations as well. So we got to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about. But if you are impacted, Heidi, if they were to, let's say, draw all the fresh water out of your well, they would be liable to repair that for you, to make that right. And you should not have to sue about that. This comes to an agreement with your local township, your borough, your local authorities, whatever agreements they make with, whether it's a shopping center, whether it's a manufacturing facility, or whether it's a new school, they set the requirements for what's going to be appropriate in their community. And so, there are different organizations that assist local governments in making sure that they get this right. So there are solutions to this stuff, and I know a lot of us don't like any development and so on and so forth. I get that. Believe me, I get that. But it's also somebody's land that they want to sell and they want to develop, and this is America, and they get to do that too. Just need to do it responsibly and be responsible neighbors, whether it's water usage, whether it's electromagnetic interference, whether it's noise interference, light interference, traffic, all those things are, all things that in fact impact all of us, and it needs to be done correctly or it shouldn't be done at all. All right. Next. Oh, we're going to go to a poll question. All right. Poll question number 2. Should someone be able to gain American citizenship by giving birth in our country? And I talked about this in the opening on birthright tourism. So should someone be able to gain American citizenship just by giving birth in our country? If you agree, press 1 for yes. If you don't agree, press 2 for no. Okay, next question, please. Oh, press star 3 if you have a question so you can get in the queue. Sorry, I forgot to tell everybody that. Star 3 to get in the queue. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Graham from Harrisburg with a question on kratom.
Okay, Graham, go ahead.
Well, as you know, I gave you some information yesterday on 7-hydroxymetrogene, and the argument for this product called kratom, which has different names, but is sold in truck stops, small stores, vape shops, is virtually killing people. And especially those who are on multiple drugs, mostly psychotropic drugs. It's a very important thing. I've studied it, and I've given good references. 43 of them are cited studies that show what it does to the human body. The problem is only 7 states have outlawed it, and even in those 7 states, there's a problem of enforcement, and it's only reduced the amount of usage by about 30%. I think it's something that's very important and is just one more attack on our children and those who are reaching out that have mental health problems or trying to recover. It's not a safe process.
Graham, I would tend to agree with you, and of course, I'm going to read the information that you gave me before forwarding it on, and we find ourselves in this situation on multiple occasions where no good deed goes unpunished. Look, this is America. You should be able to make your own choices and do things as you want to, including, if you're an adult, and you want to drink alcohol responsibly or smoke cigarettes or vape, like, even though I wouldn't recommend any of that, that's your decision, and I support your decision and your constitutional rights to do that. However, as Graham has stated, oftentimes this stuff, and we're seeing it rear its head right now with the hallucinogenic hemp product. Hemp was always said that it's rope, not dope, because it has no hallucinogenic effects. Unfortunately, it has been re-engineered oftentimes overseas to have hallucinogenic effects, and just like kratom, marketed to children through different approaches, oftentimes the flavor. There's not many adults that want to buy any of that product that's flavored like bubble gum or watermelon or something like that, and it is particularly marketed, especially from overseas and especially from our adversaries in China, to our children. And on that note, for certain, I agree with you, Graham. And we are, I know we're considering federal legislation regarding the hemp, and I think kratom will follow directly. But I've seen, at least that you've given me the information. I mean, I took a cursory look at it last night. But I have to go through it, and then I will make sure that the secretary receives that information. All right. Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for alerting everybody on the call to this new scourge. It just never ends. They pop up, they change the name, and they just keep going. All right. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Nada from Dover with a question on the SAVE Act.
Okay, Nada, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. Can you just give me bullet point on everything that's in the SAVE Act?
Okay, yeah, and that's important because there have been several versions. The version that we're currently discussing, and I think it's the only one that has any viability, only has 2 provisions. Those 2 provisions are verification of citizenship to vote in national elections, so that would be for President, United States Senate, members of Congress, national elections, and voter identification. So we need to know who you are and verify that you are approved or qualified to vote in your political subdivision. Same thing for national elections. Those are the only two provisions. It doesn't have anything about absentee ballots or mail-in, ubiquitous mail-in ballots or anything like that. There were previous versions that had other things like that in them. They are not on the table at this time. The only version that we're talking about is just those two provisions. That's the one that we passed 4 or 5 times out of the House. That is the one that sits currently in the Senate waiting action. Regardless of what anybody, including the president, says, that's the only legislative proposal that is on the table in the Senate right now. So that should answer your question. I appreciate it, Nate. Hopefully that does it. All right, next question, please.
Sir, we have Nathaniel from Harrisburg with a question on housing prices.
Okay, Nathaniel, go ahead.
Hello.
Are you there?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I gave my name is Nathan. Sorry, so I didn't know you were talking to me.
Oh, okay.
I've heard you talk. You're good. I've heard you talk a lot about the deficit and spending, but not specifically what spending you'd like to bring under control. I mean, the deficit is approaching $2 trillion, and the budget's, only $7 trillion. So what specifically are you going to bring down that's going to bring the deficit under control?
I appreciate the question, Nathan. All of it, every single bit of it. Like I'm not, I don't pick winners and losers in this whole spending thing, because I think that every single federal program is worthy of scrutiny. Every single federal program likely has some waste or some abuse, and it might not be intentional. Some of it might be fraudulent, but every single one. As a matter of fact, instead of the way that we do it now, I prefer going line by line, every single line of the budget, numbers by numbers, say, is this program working correctly? Is it spending the right amount of money? Is it spending too much? Should we spend more? Do we even need this program? Do we need a different program? We tried to force that. I was one of the people that tried to force that. And look, I'm in the majority, so it's both sides that do this. I just call the balls and strikes the way I see them. It's both sides that do this. They always say, "Oh, we don't have time to do it. We can't go through all that, and we just have to fall down on the same approach." And the same approach, by the way, Nathan, is we come up with a budget. A budget in your family is, well, this is how much our income is, and this is how much we're going to spend on the things we need, like housing and food, education, car payments, insurance, those kind of things, and then what's left over for going out to dinner, buying clothes, maybe a nice outfit, or going on a family vacation. That's not how the federal government does it. It looks at last year's budget, says we want to spend X amount more, and then just that's the new number, and we just add more money to it. We don't ever look at each program by program. So for me, I'd look at every single program. I am not, there's no sacred cow for me. And I know a lot of people say, well, Perry, you wore the uniform for almost 40 years. I bet you don't want to, you won't look at the Department of War or the Department of Defense. I absolutely will. They haven't passed an audit. And as a person who served from private to general, I've seen massive amounts of waste at the, from the Pentagon, then the Department of Defense, now the Department of War. And I've said so. And I just told, actually, the people that have, from the Department of War, that have come to me and said, we're looking to do a one-time expense to increase weapons and munitions production because we can't produce fast enough. We don't have the lines for it. I've told them, I can't just spend money that, that we don't have without you showing me what you're doing to root out the waste and the abuse and the misuse of the funds that we already spent. When the Department of War loses entire missile systems, that's a signal that there's a huge problem that they need to get after. So while we understand they need the resources, I want them to have them, but your money is not just to be thrown away and it's because it's so important we can't ask any questions. So I would say every bit of it, Nathan. Thank you. All right. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Cynthia from Harrisburg with a question about you.
Oh, all right, Cynthia, go ahead. Are you there, Cynthia?
Yes.
Hello. Oh, there you are.
Okay. What I want to say is, you said you grew up in Bear Hill Street, right?
Yep. My first address was in Harrisburg on Berry Hill Street.
Okay. So there's two sides of Berry Hill Street. There's the mansions on the one side, and the townhouses on the other side. Okay.
Yep.
What side did you live on?
Well, I guarantee you, Cynthia, it was not the mansion side. As a matter of fact, earlier this spring, my mom and I took a trip down memory lane. We had an appointment together in Harrisburg, and I said, hey, can we go? Let's just go see the old place. The old place is all boarded up. The porch is falling down, falling in, and no one lives there. It is not. I guarantee it's not. It is not one on the mansion side for certain. That answer your question? I hope it does. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Next question, please. And dial star 3 if you have a question.
Sir, we have Bobby from Harrisburg with a question on flock cameras.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for
Go ahead,
doing
Bobby.
this. It's really nice to be able to get in touch with our representatives like this on a first-hand basis, so thank you for that. My question is about flock surveillance. It seems like they're popping up everywhere, but at the same time, we're seeing all these stories about how they're being misused. And the whole exchange and social contract, I don't think we as a citizenship agreed to give up that power, and I don't think we're getting any protection from it. Is there any plan to limit their reach or anything like that?
Well, I appreciate the question very much, Bobby. I'm the first member of Congress that even brought the subject up. We were in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee working on a bill for highway funding, and I had an amendment on the bill to limit the use of not only flock cameras, but generally what's associated with a flock camera. In case anybody's not familiar, flock is a brand name. So there are multiple companies that make these cameras, and as Bobby said, they are being installed ubiquitously, not only by governments, but also by private industries and companies in their parking lots or what have you. And almost all of them have associated with them what's called an automatic license plate reader, ALPR, automatic license plate reader. So not only are they taking a picture or a video of your vehicle, but they're also taking a picture and logging your license plate data. And it's one thing when law enforcement wants to use that, and it's a very powerful tool, obviously. You can imagine if these things are set up all around your town parking lots or whatever, and you're trying to catch a criminal, it's very it's very helpful to law enforcement. The issue becomes, among other things, the abuse of the data, because it's not just law enforcement that has access to it. And as Bobby, I think, has rightly kind of enumerated there, that we have our constitutional rights, particularly the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, where we should not be subject to unlawful search and seizure. Now, people will say, yeah, but your license plate is not private information. It's on your car. Anybody can see it. And I would tend to agree with you about that. However, what is, I think, your private information is where you go, what time you were there, what car you were driving, what you were wearing, how long you spent in the location. And again, it's one thing when law enforcement with legitimate reason has need to use these to catch the bad guys. It's another when this data is being wholesale sold to anybody that has the money to buy it, including the Communist Party of China. And I'm just going to remind everybody that if you didn't know this, in Iran, where we did strikes and to take out Iran's leadership, one of the primary ways that we identified Iran's leadership and location was through traffic cameras, and the data and the information that we got from that and have access to. The same thing can be said about America and Americans. And so for me, there's a very limited use. They're very powerful, but we're not giving up, and I'm not going to give up. Look, I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, right? And so my job is to make sure that's happening. And so, we're not just giving up our freedoms and our privacy so that data can be sold to whoever wants to use it to do whatever they want to do. Maybe they want to use it to market to you. Maybe somebody nefariously wants to buy the data. Just imagine this. I mean, we've heard these reports, just so you know. Not only has it been abused by some people in law enforcement, but what about people that want to buy it to get even or to get back at an ex-wife, an ex-husband, an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend or something like that, and to track their movements and pinpoint their location at a certain time? That's really the ubiquitous value of these. And we, of course, just heard recently that Flock was in negotiations with the ride-sharing companies. Those are generally known as Uber and Lyft, to install Flocks not really install Flocks, but to get the data from the cameras in their cars, which is collecting literally billions of license plate data and location in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, the technology is powerful. Like I said, I think there's a legitimate use for it. We are working with law enforcement to make sure that the use is appropriate. But at the same time, my job is to make sure that your constitutional rights are protected and that the right to not have unlawful, unwarranted, or warrantless violations of search and seizure put upon you by your government. And let's remember, while maybe your local lumber yard or your local retailer put Flock cameras in their parking lot, you make a choice to go there and whether you want the camera picking up your license plate or not, but they don't have the power to arrest you, detain you, kick you out of your home, and incarcerate you. The government does. And so we got to be very careful with this. And I think there needs to be, like many things that have been discussed tonight, there needs to be at least some modicum of review and just make sure that our rights and our safety is safeguarded. So, thanks so much for the question, Bobby. All right, next question, please.
Sir, we have Brandon from Dillsburg with a question on energy and data centers.
Okay, go ahead, Brandon.
Hello, Scott.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Are you there?
Oh, yes. Hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead, Brandon.
Okay. As you know, we share a power grid with New Jersey and Maryland, and
yep.
They're building data centers too. And we talked about kind of the power thing too. Supply seems to be what we need, right? Regardless, even before the data centers. Like
Correct.
you said, prices are going up. So I don't quite understand when we talk about, I know that's the party line of not liking wind or solar, but the contracts to get those up are a lot cheaper per megawatt hour than it is for other areas. Why aren't we looking at every single energy source we possibly can and promoting legislation on that to stem the tide? We know these data centers are going to get built. We know they're going to take more energy, and we know prices are going up. So why aren't we being proactive about it legislatively and representing what seems to be in everyone's best interest, from businesses down on to us little people?
Yeah, Brandon, I think it's a great question. And look, I'm absolutely fine with all the above approach and let the market sort it out. If you want to buy wind and solar and pay more for it, that's fine. But if you don't want to, that should be fine too. The problem is that we subsidize one at the peril of the other, and we're subsidizing the ones that are the least reliable and the most unaffordable for the sake of for the opposite, which is the most affordable and the most reliable. Brandon, if you think about it, there's a reason that Microsoft contracted with 3 Mile Island to reopen that facility. They didn't build a wind farm or a solar farm because 3 Mile Island, a nuclear facility, I think, when it shut down, was the most efficient, best-running nuclear power plant in the country. Now, they had economic issues because it was a single reactor facility, obviously because of the events in 1979 that took out the other reactor. But that having been said, the data centers want unrestricted access to reliable, continuous power. And I would just say this. I don't think that, Brandon, you or the data centers or Microsoft or anybody is any different. We all want access to reliable, continuous power. And it shouldn't just be the data centers that have access to it. It should be all of us that have access to it at an affordable price. And the price was affordable when we let the market sort it out. But we decided that we wanted to favor one type of energy over another, and we screwed up the market, and you and all of us are paying a whole lot more for that mistake. As a matter of fact, Europe did this some time ago, Germany in particular, and now they can't even compete. Like, they literally can't compete from an energy standpoint because they don't have it, and they are changing their policy and relying more on traditional, affordable, and reliable energy sources. I'm not against the other ones. I just want them to compete on a level playing field, but they don't and they won't. And I would also say this, most of those components, most of them, and most of the precursors to those components are either produced in China with slave labor or in Africa with child slave labor. I don't want to be a part of that, and we don't have to do that. The United States met every requirement of the Paris Climate Accord without being part of it, and without us as a government forcing that regulatory environment on our energy producers. That's an amazing statement. So we did it without the government's involvement, just because the market demanded it, and we did it without requiring us to pay more for unreliable sources. So God bless you, Brandon. I'm for all the above, but let them compete with each other, and let's not subsidize any of them. Thank you. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Renee from Mount Holly Springs with a question on solar panels.
Okay, Renee, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Congressman. Actually, I live in Indiana, and nothing but farm country, and I'm seeing more and more farmers selling their fields to make these solar panels in their fields. And my concern is that as of now, we're having a problem feeding Americans as is. If more farmers keep selling their farmland to put up these solar panels, it's going to be less and less and less food. And where's that going to come from?
Well, Renee, whether you live in Mount Holly or Indiana or anywhere else, look, they're concerned. I've heard the concern from my fellow legislators in some of these states, and have the same concern, especially when you talk about taking out Tier 1 soils for agriculture for energy production. Because as you know, once the panels are there, the field is unusable other than growing grass and feeding goats or what have you, which I'm not disparaging that either. But I would say this, look, farming is a very difficult profession. I grew up around farms, baling hay, picking fruit, working in the, with the cows and pigs and all that stuff. I mean, I grew up doing that stuff. Farming is an honorable but very tough living, and God bless our farmers for doing it. And unfortunately, we're victims, and they're victims of our own success. They do it more productively than any other. We do it more productively, American farmers, than any other country on the planet. And it goes to this thing about supply and demand. But I will tell you, one of the things that I have done, and like I just said, I mean, I think you probably listened to my answer regarding Brandon's questions from Dillsburg regarding, the all-above energy approach. If we want to generate with wind and solar, and that's the most economical way to do it, then I think that needs to be a component of it, but I don't think we should subsidize it. The other thing that you're subsidizing, and we're talking about it right now because the Farm Bill sounds like it might be moving through, is E15. And what that means is 15% ethanol in your fuel, mandated by the federal government, right? So it's allowed right now, but we're talking about mandating it even though many states don't do it. Now, what that does is we turn corn into ethanol and we blend it with your gasoline. What you need to know is that you're subsidizing all that. You are subsidizing the corn to be turned not into food, but into fuel. And so you're paying more per gallon to subsidize the ethanol, and you're also paying more per gallon to travel because ethanol doesn't have the volumetric efficiency of gasoline. So, for instance, if you put 20 gallons of gasoline in your car that's just pure gasoline, you're probably going to go, I would say it's quite 2/3 further. It's not quite, ethanol is up to 1/3 less efficient than gasoline, right? So you're paying more, you're subsidizing it, and you're going less far as mandated by the federal government. Look, we all want to help our farmers. I grew up on a farm. I grew up milking cows and baling hay and all that stuff. And I'm very supportive of the farmers. They need markets to be open so that the most efficient, most productive country in the world can sell our products overseas. And instead of turning our food into fuel, because every bushel of corn that is turned into ethanol is not turned into food. And, one of the reasons that it's again goes to supply and demand. And when we're spending up to 30-40% of the nationwide corn crop on ethanol, and by the way, we don't use all the ethanol that we produce. We actually produce more than we need. We produce more than we can even blend, but they're still required to produce it. And you're still required to subsidize it, and the federal government still requires it to be bought. And so all that is just distortion of the market, and to me, it's wrong-headed policy. Well, so whether it's turning farm fields into solar fields when we can do it more economically and more efficiently to produce power, or whether it's turning corn into fuel when gasoline is not only cheaper, more effective, but actually cleaner. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, it's cleaner than producing the ethanol overall in emissions. Again, we should let the market bear this stuff out and let people decide what they want to do. And if you want to put ethanol in, it should be your choice. But if you don't want to, that should be your choice too, and you shouldn't be forced to subsidize one over the other. Appreciate the question, Renee. Okay, we're going to do, looks like the last poll question here. Again, press *3 if you do have another question. But the last poll question is, are you concerned about what's happening in Michigan, New York City, Texas, and some other places with regard to Islamic extremism? Press 1 for yes. If you're not concerned, press 2. So the question is, are you concerned about what's happening in Michigan, New York City, Texas, and some other places in the United States with regard to Islamic extremism? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Okay, next question, please.
Sir, we have Jana from Dover with a question on surrogacy.
Okay, Jana, go ahead.
Well, yeah, so my question is a little multi-tiered here. First off, I'm wondering how it is determined that this surrogacy tourism is happening, where the numbers are coming from, like how often is this happening, and how do we know that it's happening this often? And then the second part of the question is, how is it determined that the intentions that these people have are malicious governmental influences versus somebody seeking legitimate surrogacy for like legitimate justifiable reasons?
Sure. And look, surrogacy can be a great thing. Thanks for the questions, Jana, and I'm gonna go through the whole thing. Surrogacy can be a wonderful thing for starting a family, having a family, and I certainly support the formation of families, because I think it's the kind of the foundation of our culture, our community, and our country. That having been said, the information comes from Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. We know many of the what do you want to call them? The surrogacy agencies that set these contracts up, and we know it because of who comes into the country and what they come with and who they deal with, and then when they leave with the child. We also know from their public pronouncements. One Chinese individual talks about, and look, there's nothing to stop him, and I don't know how far along he is in the process of purchasing and surrogating 100 baby girls from the United States to take back to China and marry them off to wealthy Chinese businessmen. We have a lot of these reports. And look, if you need, Jana, if you need the specifics of that kind of stuff, I would encourage you to call the office and we will get it for you. I think these are reasonable questions. This is an industry that happens primarily on the West Coast. Literally, there's a mansion in Northern California, and I think you can see some of this stuff has been verified, where it's a drive-through where they drive up to this place, they go inside, they choose their baby, they walk out, and they have their baby, and they leave, and then they leave the country. Now, what they're going to do with the children once they're overseas, particularly let's just say China, for all intents and purposes of this discussion, I don't know why they come to America to get a child, surrogate it, and take it back, or multiple children to take them back to China, where I guess one reason could be is that it's outlawed in China to do that, to go to, you can't go to China, surrogate a child, and then take it to another country. As a matter of fact, America is one of the only countries that does allow it. Most other countries do not allow that because they feel, as I do, that it is the primacy and the well-being of the child should be paramount. That should be the priority, not the desires of people that want to purchase a child for whatever purpose, for trafficking or for labor or what have you. So I don't know, if their intentions are to have them raised in China and become, have their fealty to the Chinese Communist Party, but then come back to the United States and vote. I don't know that's what they're going to do. But I'm going to tell you this, Jana, there's absolutely nothing from stopping them from doing that right now. And it is a complete industry. And so my legislation does not target the mother, the surrogate mother, and it essentially it minimally targets the surrogate, the person that's seeking the surrogacy from a foreign country as birth tourism. What it does do is it penalizes the companies that traffic in this kind of business and aid and assist the birth tourism industry, because for me, it's not in the best welfare and the best being for the child themselves. So that is my interest, is the welfare of the child. And so that's and in this case the country as well, because I don't think it's good to have American citizens that aren't American, but that can not only participate in elections, but that can run for office. We can have a discussion about that as well, but that's one of the potential issues. And not only just run for office, run for president of the United States. So those are all things to consider. And I think there is a legitimate, need for surrogacy, but I don't think as a birth tourism thing that's something that we as a country should be supporting or allowing. All right, next question, please.
Sir, we have Heidi from Carlisle with a question on immigration.
All right, Heidi, go ahead.
Hello, it's me again. Sorry. So my big concern is I do watch New York, and I do watch Dearborn, and I do watch Texas, and I do watch Chicago. And I would like to know what Pennsylvania is doing to protect us from other countries coming in and pushing their culture on us and protecting us.
Oh my, Heidi. Look, Pennsylvania. Look, immigration is a federal. It is responsibility of the federal government, right? So Pennsylvania can't really do a whole lot about certain things because it is by Constitution, it is the purview of the federal government. That having been said, even when I was a state legislator, the federal government was sending illegal, or foreign nationals into our state, and we asked the question: what is their health status? What is their criminal record status? How many of them? Where will they be? All those kinds of things. And the federal government will tell me right now, it's none of my business, and I don't get to know that, and they don't have to report it. So the state can do very little in that regard. Now, I will say this: the state can discourage people from being here illegally. The state can't discourage legal immigration, nor should it, but they can discourage illegal immigration. And when you have our state that hands out driver's licenses to people that are here illegally, that's an inducement to come to Pennsylvania when you're here illegally, regardless of what the illegal circumstance is. When you can get a commercial driver's license in Pennsylvania, and look, we saw this case, someone got a commercial driver's license in Pennsylvania, they couldn't read road signs, they probably weren't obviously qualified to drive the truck, and there's a horrific accident in the Midwest, I think Missouri, with this Pennsylvania license, CDL license, foreign national that was here illegally. So what the state can do is not provide inducements to be here illegally. On the other side of the equation, the federal government, this is the job of the federal government, and I would just say that I agree with many of the founding fathers that while immigration is a wonderful thing, it has to be supported by and supportive of the citizens of the country. In other words, it needs to benefit not only the immigrant, but the people in the country that the person's immigrating to. So nobody has the right to immigrate to another country. It's by the grace of that country to allow them to come. And I would say that one of the things that, if we're all concerned about the cost of incarceration, the cost of food, the cost of housing, the cost of education, the cost of health care, all those costs are driven higher by people that are in the country illegally. And there's just no reason to accept that. So states don't need to induce them by giving them licenses or free health care or free housing or free transportation or free anything, because A, we can't afford it, and B, it's not good for, and generally speaking, most citizens don't approve of that. We all want to help. We all want to help, but there's a limit to what we can do too, and we have our own citizens that are struggling to make ends meet. We don't need to make their lives any more difficult. So that's kind of where the state is and where the federal government is in that responsibility, Heidi. Thank you. Press *3 if you have a question. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Heather from York with a question about AI.
Okay, Heather, go ahead.
Hi, yes. So I work for an insurance corporation that's located in Pennsylvania, and we're currently going through massive layoffs with these automated artificial bots they're creating. Lots of jobs, even union jobs, non-union jobs. So pretty much, is there any type of things that you're interested in as far as protections for Pennsylvanians against all this AI job replacement, since it's affecting so many people? Like my employer specifically told us, you cannot expect to be doing your same job this time next year. So it's just like a waiting game for everybody.
Yeah, well, look, that's awful news, and I fear that that's going to happen to a lot of professions as artificial intelligence does more and more things and becomes more adaptive to things. Heather, we are looking at it, but it's a conundrum that is hard to solve, because the first thing is we don't know exactly what the consequences are going to be industry by industry until they're occurring. It's hard to kind of predict the future, and this is one of those things that it truly is kind of market based, right? So as the model, the different models, whether we'll just name a couple like Anthropic or Gemini or whatever, as it learns, different industries use it in different ways, and it's hard to see into the future which ones are going to use it for what, and then what do you do about that? Do you just say, look, we want to make sure that this industry keeps its employees doing this thing when it could be done more efficiently by AI, and is that really the role of government? So this is one of those scary prospects, and of course, it's one of those things right now that essentially can't be stopped. I mean, I guess we could kind of outlaw AI, artificial intelligence, so to speak, but the other side of the equation, quite honestly, there's a national security component to it. Not all of it, obviously. If you're using your phone and if you're checking with Grok or something, that's probably not a national security thing, but there is a huge national security component to some of the bigger language AI learning models where we have to compete with China, and whoever wins this race literally will bury the other country. And we don't want China with their system of social credits to be the victor here. This is not a linear equation. This is an exponential equation where whoever gets ahead and hits the next, phase of like quantum communication or quantum computing, whichever country reaches that benchmark first, the other country will never be able to catch up. It will replicate so quickly that the other country will never be able to keep up. And so what I mean by that is, and I'm just trying to make that real for you, it's not just about, your healthcare system doing an operation on you through a robot that depends on artificial intelligence. It's also where our enemy will know in advance every single plan that we have before we even execute it or consider executing it, and preempt us, and that's militarily speaking, not to mention economically speaking. So unfortunately, this thing is coming, and it is going to be, there's going to be displacement across different sectors. We just don't know which ones right now. So I'm not sure how the Department of Labor or anybody is going to react to some of these things, because we all want a world that's more efficient. Unfortunately, none of us are going to like it when it impacts what we do for a living. I don't know that AI is going to lay bricks, but I can imagine that, if you can make a machine to pick an olive and they have that, I imagine you can make a machine that will use artificial intelligence and lay bricks. And I'm not saying, I want to lay bricks. It's a hard job. But there are benefits and shortcomings. I get your concern, Heather. It is a great concern. I'm not sure I have a great answer for you from the government. Okay. Next question, please.
Sir, we have Gary from Spring Grove with a question on Iran.
Okay, Gary, go ahead. I think you're going to be our last question.
Oh, okay. This is Gary, formerly from the Eats. Scott?
Hey, Gary. Yeah.
Hi there. I have a lot of people that ask me questions, and I can't really give them a good answer. You and I both know we got the best military on the face of the planet, and they asked me about why can't we not open the Strait of Hormuz? Why can't we not just take Iran and make them a non-entity? And I can't really give them an answer, and it's a little bit confusing. And now I'm reading articles about we're short on munitions. So any enlightenment you can give in that regard?
Yeah. Let me talk about that a little bit, Gary. Good to hear from you, and I think pertinent questions. First of all, let's just start where you ended with shortage of munitions. It's not really a shortage. It's the lack of capacity to reproduce them at the rate that we would like to, so that we keep all theaters covered. So we don't necessarily have a shortage because we can do what's called cross-leveling. That's kind of taken from one theater that's not using them to go to another at some level, and so on and so forth, which is why the president wants to increase a one-time spend for defense production, so that we can increase our capacity to produce more munitions faster. Right now, we can produce them. We just can't produce them as fast as we'd like to when necessary, right? So that's the answer there. Look, on the Strait of Hormuz, even though we're dealing with, obviously, in Iran, and they've become technically much more savvy than they had been in the past, and we have the premier military in the world, but they still have systems that are fairly primitive, but able to get through some of our defenses. And the way they do that is they'll just it's just so many targets at one time, right? And so even though, first of all, radar has a hard time, Gary, you'll understand this, picking up low-level targets around the backdrop of the terrain, but it's compounded by multiple targets simultaneously by design to overwhelm your defenses. And so while we take out the vast majority of the targets, it only takes one to get through and strike a ship. And of course, the ships are very expensive. They're insured generally by Lloyd's of London. Even though the president has said, we will insure your ships, Lloyd's of London has told the ship owners, if you allow America to insure your ships when this whole thing is concluded, we will no longer insure you. So those customers are unwilling to let their insurance lap with Lloyd's and go with America. And at the same time, they don't want to take the risk of being the one ship that's going in the Straits and gets hit by one of these wayward attack drones. And it only takes one, of course, to chill the whole operation. I would say this, Gary, look, the United States has the tactical, technical, and strategic capability to end this thing right now. The question is, do the American people support any of the methodology to do that? And the answer is likely and overwhelmingly no. We didn't pick this fight, and I think the president is trying to end it as quickly and as efficiently with the least loss of life as possible. But the other thing that everybody needs to hear on this call is that if you are ascribing your values, the things that you believe in, to the leadership in Iran, that is a mistake. This is a country run by people that, quite honestly, to put it bluntly, they want to martyr themselves and destroy the United States of America, and dying in the process is actually a goal that they have. We value life, but they value it differently. Their reward is completely in the afterlife, and dying in pursuit of that is what they desire. And so it's very difficult to work with someone and come to an agreement that is willing to commit suicide. And that's what the president is dealing with right now. And the problem is that, you have to take your adversaries at face value when they say they want to kill you, and they're providing themselves access to nuclear weapons. And you can take a chance on knocking it out of the sky, but if you miss, heaven forbid, there will be a nuclear attack. And the president is trying very desperately to avert that at minimum cost, and certainly minimum cost to American lives, which have already been lost by the thousands and maimed by the tens of thousands at the hands of Iran. So we could do it, Gary, but I think that judiciously the president is seeking a different solution, which is obviously very frustrating to all of us, and it's very difficult because we're dealing with people that would would rather commit suicide than agree. So that's the situation. All right, listen, folks, it's gone fast. It always does, but unfortunately, I got to wrap up tonight's town hall. So thanks again so much for joining this evening. It's been another great discussion, and I hope to see you again next month. Again, if you'd like to get a list, get on our update list for emails, just press *6 at this time, and you'll get that stuff automatically. You can also contact me on media platforms at Rep Scott Perry. That's at Rep Scott Perry. Thanks again for your time this evening. If you did not get to ask a question and still need an answer, please contact any one of our offices or send a note through our website, and we'll get you an answer.